Hello and welcome to the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, Echoes and Curves. In the last video, we learned how to quilt serpentine lines. In this video, we're going to take that serpentine line and create several different variations and see the kind of effects they can create on our quilts. And then we'll take that serpentine line and talk about how to turn the corner of a border to create an effect that will wrap around the center block. I'm going to demonstrate the designs on a sewing machine and a long arm and give you some tips along the way. So, let's get started. In this first variation, we're going to incorporate spacing and a little bit of filler to create a more elegant look. I'm going to show you how to quilt the variations on a quilt sandwich that I have laying around. If you did the last Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, it just might look familiar. I'm going to start by quilting 3 serpentine lines. Then I'll travel along the edge for about an inch, then quilt 1 more serpentine line. What I essentially have here is a group of serpentines and then a nice big space that I'm going to fill in with another design. Now in this area you can put in any other design that you want, just as long as you end up on the opposite side. I'm going to quilt the side of a feather because I think it gives it a nice, elegant look. Now this is something we've seen before in the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, and if you want more instructions on how to quilt the feather, you can check out the link in the description box below. I'm essentially treating that serpentine line like the spine of my feather. And there I have the beautiful first part of my design. Now once I fill in that space, it's time to keep doing the same thing. So I'm going to quilt 2 more serpentine lines, so I have my next grouping of 3. Leave a space, and then fill it in. Again, remembering that I want to end up at the furthest edge so I can add more serpentine lines. Just because I'm quilting my serpentine lines in groups of 3 doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. I could add more or less serpentine lines depending on the look I'm going for. And like I said, you can put any filler in that gap. Wishbones are always a favorite of mine as well. I think this variation has an elegant look to it, and it's one that I'll use when I want the serpentine lines to kind of pop out. Okay, now in this variation, we're going to switch up the directions to give us a little bit of a different look. I'm going to quilt a few serpentine lines, and then once I'm at that highest point, I'm going to switch directions and go the other way. It's going to leave me with an area like this, and I want to fill it in with any design, but where I want to end up is over here so that I can continue on quilting my serpentine lines. Since this is a larger space, wishbones or back and forth lines or a filler will be good options. Then once I get to that point, I can continue quilting my serpentine lines in the opposite direction. And then again, when I'm ready, I can stop at the highest point, quilt my next serpentine line so it goes the opposite direction, and then fill in that area. So what I've created is another area that's just like the first one, except it's flipped on the other side. This time, instead of filling it in and working to this point, I'm going to add some echo lines of the shape I just quilted, ending where I started. It doesn't matter how many times I echo it, I just want to make sure I end at the furthest point so I can continue on with this design. What's awesome about this design, if you don't want to quilt as many serpentine lines, don't echo the ones you just quilted. Just quilt your shape, fill it in, and then continue it on to get a little bit more of a sloping, elongated kind of shape. In our last variation, and we're going to keep flipping sides, except we're going to throw a little bit of something different in that space that we create. Now let's pretend that I'm going to go ahead and switch and quilt my serpentine line the next direction. Before I move on, I can add a little teardrop or a little leaf shape in that space and then continue on. You can still add echo lines in between them if you'd like, or you can just go from one to the next. But the result is going to give you a less dense quilting design that's a little bit more minimalistic in its looks. Now that we've seen some different ways to quilt the serpentine line design, hopefully you found 1 or 2 that you want to try out on your quilt. But it's all fun and games until you get to that border corner. I'm going to show you how to quilt it around the corner, but let me reassure you, before we get started, it's going to look a little weird because it has to. It's going around a corner. I'm going to start quilting about 1/3 of the way down from the corner so that I can kind of get into the groove before I have to turn the corner. For the most part, I like to quilt my serpentine lines so that the highest point is on the outside of the box. There's not really a reason for that, that's just how I kind of do it. Once I get to that inner border corner, I know that it's time to start my turn. So once I get to that point, I'm going to quilt my serpentine line just like I always have, except I'm going to curl it around and kind of skip over the opposite corner, running into the next edge of my area. Then I'm going to travel just like I normally would, and then echo my way back to the inner corner. So the main difference with this is that all my serpentine lines are going to come back to that inner corner until I get that outer edge quilted out ahead of where I'm at. So now I'm going to echo my way back, running it into that edge, traveling, echoing my way back to that inner corner, and then do it again. So now that that line is out in front of my inner corner, I can go back to normal, quilting my serpentine lines from edge to edge. So there is my corner. Now, one thing I want to point out is that it does look a little weird as I make that turn, and that's okay, it's supposed to. It does add that look that it's wrapping around it. Then, once I hit the middle of my other side, that's when I can go ahead and quilt some of my variations, or just continue serpentine lines until we get to the next corner, where we'll do it again. Now, I'm using this contrasting thread and bright lights so that you can really see the quilting and the shadow that it creates. However, when you're quilting on an actual quilt, using a thread color that matches your quilt top is going to give you the best results. When I quilted this area on the challenge panel, I used the orchid color thread. Okay, now as I'm approaching that other corner, we're going to do it again. I'm going to keep going until I get to that inner corner and then make it wrap around. That line just skipped right over that corner so that I can change sides. Now I'm going to run into this side of my area, travel, and then kind of echo back to that inner corner, repeating until the outer lines are extending past the inner lines, and you're continuing on your merry way. Now, I will admit it can be tricky when you do this the first couple times, so just take your time, work through those corners, and fill in the area as much as you can, and you'll do fine. Now let's try a few on the long arm. If you don't want the serpentine lines to work their way around the corner, or maybe you're struggling with that turn, you can go a completely different route. When you get to that inner corner, instead of making it turn, just fill the area with a leaf shape or a swirl, and then continue on quilting those serpentine lines. This is something I do if I have pieces of a block that don't wrap around, instead only meet at one point. Adding that little leaf in the center just kind of pulls it all together and makes it look almost like a motif. Now it's your turn. If you're quilting along with me on the custom Echoes and Curves panel, go ahead and fill the area on the quilt highlighted in red. Quilt one or two of your favorite variations and practice turning the corners. Remember, no stress, just fill in the area and move on. And as always, I've put together a downloadable PDF with tips and quilting diagrams so that you can really master these variations. Now go ahead and give it a try, because next week we're going to delve into another video of the Echoes and Curves Free Motion Challenge. Thanks so much for watching, and happy quilting!